So we take them to the compost facility that we took it to, where we took our food waste.
Oh, okay.
So Go Zero initially, well, so we'll do it again this year too. There is a compost facility, an industrial compost facility that is associated with the London Correctional Facility. And so we had always in the past, they had taken our food waste there, they had taken our pumpkins there. I think they're taking food waste someplace else now, but we're still going to take our pumpkins to that facility.
So I'm a coder.
Yeah.
And we are copying you.
Yes.
So
I talked.
greatest form of flattery.
Yeah, I was
And
gonna
we're
say,
doing pumpkins this year.
yeah. Okay. Good. Good.
So
I talked to somebody.
I know who works in Larry Lunchers.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah.
Mike, Dave.
We just had our environment.
Dave?
Dave, yeah.
Dave, yeah.
We have our environmental sustainability vision. So I'm writing a blog
Oh, okay.
to put on our I was just curious what you guys study, because that's exactly what we're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
We've learned from you because we're going to have the 20-foot or 20-yard, whatever
Yeah.
things.
And then have the hauler.
Yep.
It was nice to see you too. Thanks, you too.
Yeah, so we're happy from you.
Yeah, I think if people ask where we take it, I just say an industrial facility. I just say industrial compost facility and get into like the details of it. Yeah.
I think
So,
it's awesome because it gives me the trash.
well, and you can't trust Ohio Mulch because they say that they take them, and then I don't think that they do. Oh, I know. And I got he called and yelled at me. So we put in our. That's why we started the whole thing was because local waste was telling us that if pumpkins were in the yard waste, they were taking them
whole
out.
thing.
They'll take it out and they'll put it in the trash. So I'm like, well, why are you doing that? He said, well, because the yard waste facility doesn't take them. So I called the yard waste facility. I said, is that true? Do you guys take pumpkins? She said, no, that's me. Okay. So we put all of our materials last year. We said we're doing a pumpkin compost because Ohio Mulch doesn't take your pumpkins. They will go to the landfill. Oh, he was so mad. The guy that runs that, he was so mad. Oh, he was like, that's not true. Whatever. So I took it out of my stuff this year. Yeah. So we took it out of our like, material, out of our promotion material.
Okay.
But because now I think people just expect the pumpkins to be like drop off. So yeah. So anyway, yeah.
We're having our collection right next to the drop-off dumpster.
Okay,
Which is
good.
also nice.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. It's the same thing. Same setup. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Well, good luck. Let me know how it goes. Yeah.
I would do.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So I'm curious to see if our numbers go down.
That's for the last session. So yours should be
That was the joke. We're like
down here, hopefully.
Well, you probably did. And we're probably
Oh, okay. It's in the reverse order. So here's your folder. Yeah, you have all your bios if you want to give those as the introductions. And then this, we'll just set this out. And you can let people know after the session they can sign if they want to do voluntary continuing ed credits, and we usually send out a certificate.
We signed a letter saying
So that's pretty much it. You can leave that up if you want, if there's no slides, and
oh, really?
everything's set up for you.
Okay.
That one's upstairs, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's okay.
Great job on,
Yeah.
bags off my bathroom.
Yeah.
And right now my car's packed. I can car myself and it's
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I knew it was coming, and I knew you guys got one. So I've just been, I get the big pieces of styrofoam, and they're just gonna be going upstairs.
perfect. That's what I do too.
I love it. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm so curious about all this. Just bring it right back.
Only residential. Only residential.
me to be one of the
what they need to do.
people up here.
So, I mean,
There's Luddites.
heavy handed this ACI.
So I think this mic has pretty good pickup. Just make sure you're kind of speaking similar to it for the live stream.
No, we don't.
Which I don't think is going to happen here.
Yeah. No, we don't have any. We don't have that. Yeah.
There's no requirement, there's no outreach in terms of building, diversion.
Not for food waste and recycling. I think they have some stuff like our building department does for basic justice. He can probably tell you they have a bunch of stuff on like environmental things like when you build your buildings and do upgrades and that sort of thing from like trash recycling. We don't have any.
I think it's one of our biggest things is programs like big nut to crack is like just walking through the street, wherever, you get the styrofoam cup, that's about whatever. So it's like, anyway, I was just curious if any of you guys were, well, I go to one of the coffee shops, I go to like, you have a cart, and so I'm trying to figure out, is anybody tried to cart where is it to? I mean, there are companies that are passionate about what they're selling. The idea is not
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So much for 6 feet apart.
Yeah, I know. No kidding.
So how long have you been with Revenue?
I've been here almost 9 years.
Okay.
So I started back in 2013. Had a number of different roles, but I've spent the last 4 years or so working a lot on our innovation partnerships.
Okay.
So how do we work with larger enterprises and companies to take what we build a really good framework for, which is sourcing, vetting, partnering with, and investing in startups. And build that around innovation strategies. So we work with Range, State Auto, Ohio State, Nation Mutual,
Okay.
Ohio Health, Coda, Swigo as a partner, about to work with the others. So all kinds of different companies want to do more around innovation, and they have a part of that strategy that is engaging and or investing in startups.
Yeah, we've talked about, I mean, you know Scott, I think. Hey, how you doing? Good to see you. It's just the glasses that gave it away. Everything else. Can't even see your smiley face.
It is smiling underneath.
Talked a few times, Mike McCann.
Hey, Mike.
Great to see you, yeah.
They seem to want to go this way. They seem to want to go,
I know, flipping around the wrong way.
yeah, they all seem to want to go this way.
Josh, I work
Which, you know, the double-sided card is always, always the plan. Yeah, Scott's talked about, I think you know Scott, and he's talked
Met him
about,
a couple times.
he's talked about how do we potentially look at partnering with you guys on some things which we would frankly kill and destroy, but they're kind of interesting.
And that's what we do. So how do you kind of build a kind of right size governance, for lack of a better term, to do some small, kind of relatively low risk concept to things that you go into partnerships. And then in some cases like State Auto, we coupled that with a fund that's into some of these. So they've been a dozen test projects over the last few years. And they launched a $25 million fund and they've invested in some. And so just kind of benefited application.
Yeah.
The company they partnered with, but they've also got a really strong portfolio. One of the companies went public back in July.
Okay.
So it's a 1-2 punch with the operational area and the infrastructure.
I mean, is their purpose of their fund or their investment to actually turn, or is it to look at more capabilities that at some point they will sort of roll in?
They end end up being both. So we manage the funds, so we kind of give it the lens of how do you run this in a way that can drive returns and be a sound investment.
Yeah, sure. We got 3 minutes. Yeah.
And then we work with them strategically what the opportunity to work with them. What we've done is everything they make they've also partnered with. So they end up truly being strategic.
Okay.
So it's a balance. You end up maybe passing on things that financially.
Alrighty, folks, we are going to get started here shortly. You can please take your seats. Thanks.
Because there's definitely some things that we see sort of long term on the horizon, but it's probably too early for us to get it, to actually acquire it and try to be part of it. But at the same time, I'd like to get a lot closer to it.
Investing in technologies that enable the kind of things in the supply chain.
Alrighty, folks, let's get started. So welcome to the first ever economic development panel at MORPC-Summit On Sustainability. Pardon me, folks. Pardon me. We're going to get started here. Thanks. This is the first ever economic development session at the Summit on Sustainability, so we're really, really excited. I think the economic development conversation is really evolving to be more cognizant and inclusive of sustainability and candidly a whole range of long-range planning concepts. So very, very excited for this panel today. We also have a great group of panelists. I'm very excited for that in particular. We have Jeff Wilkins with Swaco, Mike McCann with Rev1 Ventures, and Brian King with Advanced Drainage Systems. So I'll let them do their bios and talk a little bit about their organizations and their organizational approaches to sustainability in a moment. So I'll start, though, kind of a little bit of table setting. What is economic development and how does it intersect with the sustainability conversation? So the simple answer is economic development is that host of activities that's focused on bringing jobs, bringing businesses to our communities, as well as maintaining and expanding on the jobs and businesses that are in the communities already. So that's your textbook answer. Really what it means is, integrating across, again, a lot of mobility concepts, housing concepts, and sustainability concepts to make sure that businesses that are coming into our communities have what they need to succeed and that the workers and employees of those businesses have what they need to succeed. So first question is for the whole panel. We'll start with Mike and just go down. Just talk a little bit about your organization, your background, and your approaches to sustainability.
Sure. If everybody can hear me okay, if it's too quiet, let me know. So again, Mike McCann, I'm with Rev1 Ventures. A little bit of my background, I've been with Rev1 for almost 9 years now. I started my career working with high-growth, high-tech startup companies and found my way to Rev1 back in early 2013, and have been a part of helping build out our startup studio and our approach to working with different partners and organizations as well as startups across the community. Rev1, what we do, we provide services and capital to entrepreneurs and innovators. So this idea of how do you combine key resources that help these companies grow and sustain and be strong organizations here in the region, and provide the services and know-how and capabilities so that they can do that with more efficiency and have a higher probability of success. So you might be asking, we work with startups, why are we here at an economic development and sustainability panel? And what we do at Rev1, a lot of what we do is inextricably linked with both of those. So in one perspective, from economic development, startups are job creators. We consume and need key infrastructure in the region to be successful. So we work really, really closely with a wide range of economic development players in Ohio and in the region to help make sure there's an environment where these companies can be job creators, where they can attract capital, and we can have decades of growth and strong companies in these different technology sectors. On the sustainability side, we see this a lot in that we work with entrepreneurs and innovators who are thinking of new technologies, new services, new products and companies that can make an impact in different areas, and inevitably that leads to some sleeve of innovations that are involved in sustainability and ESG in some way, shape, or form. So we actually spend a lot of time with our partners thinking about sustainability and thinking about where are there new emerging technologies and companies that can make an impact there. So really, really excited to be here and to participate in the panel.
Thanks, Mike. Brian?
Good morning. My name is Brian King, and I lead marketing for Advanced Drainage Systems. Advanced Drainage Systems, for those of you that don't know, we're about a $2 billion publicly traded company. We're in Hilliard, Ohio. I've been with the company for a year, and a year ago I didn't know who Advanced Drainage Systems was. So one of the things that we're trying to do is just raise our visibility within the community and within the organization. What we do is we provide stormwater management solutions. So we think about stormwater management as what happens to a raindrop. So the life cycle of a raindrop, we capture it under a variety of different products. We put it through pipe, so we convey it to where you want it to be. You then have a retention-detention type solution where you keep it, and then eventually you let it back into the environment through a treatment system. And so what we're trying to do with our sustainability story is, because we are the second largest recycler in the US, we recycle over 500 million pounds of plastic every year. It tends to be HDPE or type 2 plastic. And we have a pretty good growth curve going forward, and so we need more raw material, simply put. And our sustainability story used to be in the back of our investor deck. It's now the front page of our investor deck. It's what we talk about. Everybody is very interested about ESG, and obviously our sustainability story is a key part of that. I would tell you we've done a pretty poor job in actually communicating that to the community and to our investors. It's one of the questions that our employees ask, and actually future employees ask about our sustainability story. And so I think there's a good thing around encouraging people to the Central Ohio region, because we are a sustainable company. We are positioning ourselves as a water management solutions company and not a building materials company, because what we do is really about water, and we talk about that as our reason is water. So anything that we can do to encourage recycling, encourage sustainability, you'll hear about this in a second, but what we're trying to do is we've actually partnered with some groups to encourage companies to recycle more, encourage people to recycle more. We use both post-consumer and post-industrial waste, but we need more of it. And as we're starting to become more, it used to be for us, we were the only game in town to recycle products. Now a lot of consumer packaged goods companies are looking for more materials to use because it's becoming more important. And so we make sure that we're trying to push all the way across the value chain, more recycling, more collection of recycled goods. We can use those recycled goods, so key partners in that value chain. So very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this panel. It's an honor to be with you guys, and I look forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Brian. And Jeff, same question. Thank you.
Jeff Wilkins, Director of Administration. I've been with SWACO 4 years now. I started my career actually in public administration. I grew up in Fishers, Indiana. I was an assistant town manager there. I've been a city manager, county administrator, most recently before SWACO, Kendall County, Illinois. We were the fastest growing county in the nation by percentage growth in the 2000s. So I dealt with a lot of issues, we did solid waste management planning and such, but where, as far as coming to SWACO, like Brian, you didn't know ADS, but I didn't know SWACO. What is SWACO? But when you saw the mission about SWACO, it really is energizing, and then to be able to stem out into economic development is really it's rewarding. So as you know, our mission is more than just the landfills. We have one of the largest public sector owned landfill in the nation, and we have 2 transfer stations. But much more than that. So that's what this whole summit's really about. But part of our mission is to manage the waste stream for the community's growth, economic growth, prosperity, and sustainability. So that fits right there. When you go to various sessions, you probably heard that our goal is to get to 70% diversion recycling rate for the whole region, and that's not just us. We're a major part of that, but and you'll see statistics also that 70% of what goes into the landfill can be recyclable. Actually, put this on your at some of the desks or seats, but what's neat about that, when you talk about economic development, a lot of times you hear the words location quotient and such. When we talk to prospects, especially in the economic development field, usually it'll be about your unemployment rate, what's the amount that you're going to pay workers, what's your job training. Almost all of our prospects, it's supply. What is your supply? How can you guarantee the supply? And obviously, we're not a supplier, but we're going to be part, hopefully, helping grow that supply chain. So, and it is more than just the recycling programs at the business. We do have, and you probably heard different sessions. We have program administrators that will help businesses set up recycling programs within their business, which is a major part of this too, to help provide the supply. But as we go through this session over the next hour, we'll talk a little bit more about the broader supply chain that we want to help grow. So I'll kind of hold back, but that's where most of my comments in the rest of the hour will be.
Yeah, well, let's get right into that. So, I know that there is a contemplated site that SWACO is looking at bringing forward the Green Economy Business Park south of Columbus on 665. And, I wanted to ask about that because I know a key part of that really is supply. And I'm going to introduce the term MRF, which is a materials reclamation facility. And that's really that point where the large-scale facility where, you have a waste stream coming in one side and sorted, usable supply of recyclables on the other side. So, I know that a MRF is a cornerstone of that. And as I hear about supply, how much do you think about that MRF as a foundational component? And really, how do you approach those large-scale supply needs when you're talking to prospects?
Well, that's a key component of the supply chain. MRF, we're trying to actually use a recycling facility anymore, but MRF is ingrained in terminology. But it is the basis. But there are other, and we know we need to have one in this region, or even multiple. But we definitely need to have one that we can help guide the recyclables to stay here for businesses. But there are other recycling centers outside of Columbus that ultimately we'd like to be able to pull that supply to Columbus, to serve businesses like ADS. So that is definitely a foundation.
Yeah, that's a great point. In regards to ADS, how do you think about that local supply and trying to support and expand local supply versus, your position of leadership in drawing supply of recycled materials from other parts of the country?
I mean, supply is key to what we need right now. Like I said, 500 million pounds is what we currently use. We could use more. And our biggest challenge right now is finding material. So we're all for it. I did notice too, in case you see me looking at my phone, I'm trying to be sustainable and not use paper. That's part of why, sustainability is within marketing at ADS, and it's because a lot of companies keep the sustainability story under operations. We think sustainability is key to what we actually do at ADS, and in fact, we make money through sustainability. A lot of companies like to do sustainability because they think it's the right thing to do. Their investors are asking for it. Their employees will want to be involved with it. We've actually figured out how to make money using sustainability. A lot of companies, one I used to be with previously, we would love the sustainability story until you got to the point with, would our customers pay us more for this? Answer is generally no. Will we make more money doing this? Answer is generally no. We've actually figured that all out, and so we want more material. We want more supply, and having that within Central Ohio to be able to service the plants in our network here in Central Ohio is very important to us, and that's why we're partnering with companies like SWACO.
Thanks, Brian. So the other end of the spectrum of supply is, Mike, what you see more of, enabling entrepreneurs and innovators. And that's obviously not going to be a large scaling exercise in the same way as an ADS might approach. It could be if their ideas take off and the solutions are viable. But how do you think about making available these streams and supply to innovators and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, there's a couple things that come to mind when we think of the potential of the Green Economy Business Park, and I'll start with structurally how Rev 1 we organize our startup studio. So we think of it in terms of talent and entrepreneur know-how. We think of it in terms of making connections that can enable companies to grow. It takes capital to invest in those companies. But then there's this idea of infrastructure and facilities. Where do entrepreneurs work? Where does R&D happen? And when you think of this business park, it's really unlikely that one organization is going to come in here and put it in a box and do all the things that you're going to do inside of that business park. So you end up developing this ecosystem. And there are, again, parts of that ecosystem that can be really attractive to entrepreneurs. Companies that are maybe opening up new parts of the waste stream that can get rerouted, can get diverted in that proximity to SWACO and to some of these other larger institutions that may be coming in and working there, can really create this, for lack of a better term, these synergies that will attract entrepreneurs and make them want to start or locate their businesses there. So for us, it becomes a great opportunity to see, okay, what kind of activities are going to happen there? What kind of facilities can open up? And where can entrepreneurs and innovators play a role to attract them? And that's where we really get excited, because we already see that in other spaces where we work today. We see lab spaces, we see manufacturing spaces with companies here, and it's just another opportunity to expand and attract the kind of companies and entrepreneurs that can really have a chance to make an impact here and create those kinds of companies that add jobs and attract capital to the region.
Thanks. Any other comments on that piece, on supply, the Green Economy Park?
No, but we'll, you know, to follow up with some comments that Brian had also, just the focus on ESG now. You know, since 2018, there's some statistics that investment, venture capital investment in ESG sustainable projects has gone up over 1,000%, you know, over $78 billion. So where before that was solar and wind, now those projects, you know, are still there, but not as many. And now they're going into the sustainability materials supply chain. So we think the timing is definitely right.
And it's a good point, you know, those ESG approaches that you see coming forward, and that's environmental and social governance. Those are corporate, you know, corporate approaches to, you know, the social position of a given company. So, you know, Brian, I wanted to ask you, it's great to have those ESG pieces. They're essential, but it's even better to use them in a way that that drives profits and is actually, you know, a contributor to the bottom line of the business. I found that ADS does that really well. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I think that is one of the challenges that most enterprises have when they talk about ESG, right? It is how do you actually make this beneficial, and that is what, you know, the comments over here, that is what investors are looking for. They're looking for sustainable profits. They're looking for a sustainable company, and you could look at us and say, wait a second, you guys are involved in plastics, right? It's a question we get all the time, is you make plastic pipe, plastic comes from the petrochemical industry, how on earth do you talk about sustainability? And that's where it's important to us to have recycled product and be, you know, it's over 50% of what we actually use from a raw material perspective is diverted out of a landfill into an application that goes into the ground for 50 to 100 years, right? So you talk about circular economy, you talk about products, and, you know, we talk about product innovation. How do you use materials and how do you use them in a better way? And we think that we use materials in a better way. We do get a lot of, you know, we get asked a lot of questions about plastics because single-use plastic is a really, it is a big issue. But we help the single-use plastic. We take it out of the economy. We're also vertically integrated as it comes to the recycling materials. So we can take from a MRF, we can take the flake and the different bales of product, and we can turn it into pellets that we actually use. And we made that investment a long time ago because we needed some capability and some expertise. We've actually thought about operating a MRF. We quickly decided that was a bad idea. That we are a pipe manufacturer, we have a little bit of expertise in recycling, but that's where we need partnerships, that's where we need people who are entrepreneurs to be able to look at those different materials, and we're looking to make investments into those as well too. So maybe we don't want to be an operator of one of those facilities, but we have capital, we make money, and making those types of investments through something like Rev1 or, you know, being a partner with Swaco is definitely something we talk about, and making those investments in Central Ohio would be important to us.
Thanks. And just to expand on that, Brian, you know, when you think about the whole supply chain, you know, what are some of the ways that you approach it from end to end as you're considering reclamation?
Yeah, I mean, we look at supply chain, obviously, you know, how close materials are to our facilities. I mean, part of, you know, when you look at your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions as it relates to science-based targets and greenhouse gas, you want to make sure that you're actually, you know, not hauling stuff from around the country to get to our facilities, and that's why, again, Central Ohio is important to us. We have multiple manufacturing locations here in Ohio, so making sure that the raw materials are close to that. And then once you've got the product made, getting it to the job site, making sure that's not, again, I mean, a plastic pipe, if you've seen it, they're pretty big, there's a lot of air there, you're not shipping a lot of product around, so making sure that we are located. And that's why we operate 55 manufacturing locations across the U.S., because shipment of materials and freight is important to our financials, and we keep on top of that. So we look at it everywhere through the value chain, both from where the raw material comes from, how we manufacture it using, you know, green energy to actually make our materials. Then when you're actually using it, then when you talk to a contractor or an engineer about why you would specify or use our product, what's the life cycle, and so it's all the way through the value chain. You have to make sustainability, and you have to make the economic decisions around why sustainability is important to you, and for us, it's important everywhere across the value chain.
Yeah, thanks for that. And you know, it brings to mind really, it puts into perspective the amount of capital that's really going into this space right now, again, across that end-to-end, across the supply chain. Mike, I wanted to ask you, you know, what are some of the ways that you approach, you know, bringing forward, and connecting that capital, making sure that it's driving solutions, that it's supporting entrepreneurs, and again, across the supply chain. How's everyone approaching that?
Yeah, it's a really good topic. Actually, a note that I had here was talking about the linkage between ESG groups and innovation groups. So as you talk about more capital going into a space, what that also means, it means two things. One, you see a pretty wide diversity in the types of companies. It's not all materials companies. You see digital technologies. You see, any kind of company you can think of, in some way maybe impacting sustainability or materials handling. But you also see a lot of noise. So there's this torrent of money going into the space, of attention going into it, new funds getting created solely focused on it. So if you're on the business side of this and you're working in an ESG group, you're probably stepping back and saying, holy cow, what is actually going on here? How do you get your arms around it? So one of the things we encourage and have actually seen some success with a few of our partners is when we're working with, say, on the enterprise side with an innovation group, ESG needs to have a seat at the table. ESG isn't something, like you said, that it is one of the last pages in the annual report. It needs to be at the forefront and integrated into different parts of the organization, just like you would see innovation to be successful needs to have a seat at the table in all these different areas. So we want to see, how can we work together and find out what are some of the bigger sustainability objectives? Where are some of these gaps or pain points in the supply chain where we can define some specific problems and go out there and look for targeted solutions and opportunities to actually make an impact. So in one example, we're working with a company. They have a very important product line that historically has created a lot of food waste, a lot of excess product that literally tons of material shipping off to a landfill. And so finding different solutions who can process that material and turn it into something new. In this case, the potential to turn it into a very specific plastic film that you could sell it into the marketplace directly or turn it into packaging materials, but you're actually finding a way to keep stuff out of the landfill, which is good, but it's also a way to reduce the waste, and you could potentially create a revenue stream, not to mention the marketing story that comes from it. So the key is getting specific, knowing what problems you want to solve, and being really, really thoughtful about the solutions you go out there and find, not just going out there and looking for the shiny things that are hitting the market.
Yeah, and it's a question I'm interested in your views on as well, Jeff. We've discussed before, the shiny thing, right? That it's a beautiful thing about the sustainability space that entrepreneurs can come in with big ideas, big visions, and potentially, change the world. And I was wondering if you could speak to, with SWACO's role as a steward, as a civic steward, a regional steward of this whole space, how do you approach folks bringing forward these ideas and giving space and room to innovate?
That's a good one. SWACO, again, we're a special unit of government, so we definitely want to partner with the private sector. We don't want to do everything. We want to energize them and leverage them. But we do get approached, by various technologies. They have the silver bullet, drop the mic, just give us the supply and we're done. But the challenge with that is that the businesses that are already in the economy, the local economy, these are real jobs, real businesses that it really could affect them. So we're very cautious, so we think just like when you invest, you want to diversify. Just like a business, they want to diversify. So we want to make sure that we have multiple solutions, multiple businesses, startups, mid-cap, large cap. So we're very cognizant of that. Also, some aspects with the business park too, in that we want to partner with all of the local economic development organizations, and we have great relationships there, that we're trying to pull businesses in this space to the whole region, not just the business park, but because there might be some uses that don't fit on the business park, but might be something somewhere else in the district. So we really are trying to work with all the economic developers to bring that together. A lot of our focus, though, is again, infrastructure. We've had some conversations here recently, here, and not just when we say infrastructure and sustainability, it might be the recycling carts, it might be the type of business along the supply chain, but the traditional infrastructure also includes rail and roads and such. And lately, we have Rickenbacker, we got Buckeye Rail, we have some really good, obviously the interstates are fantastic, but a lot of times if we want to be that hub, and get the supply for groups like ADS, we may have to bring it again from all over the Midwest, and it's that rail. So we're starting to have some conversations with them too. So back to your original question, we want diversity and try to produce a system that will produce a number of companies.
Thanks for that. So, Brian, I wanted to ask, as long as we're on innovation, what are some of the approaches internally at ADS to innovation and new products, emerging products? I know it's a specialty of yours.
Right. So we are an innovator. I mean, plastic pipe is still considered the new kid on the block, even though it's been around for 55 years. And what we are looking at and what we've made investments in recently is material science. Right now, we tend to use single types of plastic, right? And we believe that through blending and some material science additives, some other things that we're actually looking at, that we can actually make products which have different performance characteristics. All plastic based again, but again, looking at we have an opportunity to look at different recycled plastics. How do we blend those together without killing the recycling side of things? And so that's where we've made recent investments in material science. We're actually looking at a new lab facility here in Columbus. We from a sustainability perspective, we have 3 buildings that we're actually operate in. We're looking at how do we actually put that together and invest in the community in a better, again, facility. So the comment that was made here around ESG and sustainability, we're thinking about that every time we make a move, every time we make an investment from a capital perspective, every time we look at a new product innovation, we're always thinking about what that does to our scores and our numbers. You're not going to see us innovate into a space that potentially damages one of our sustainability goals. And that is very different, right? And for me, from the experience I've had across different companies, that's a very different way to think about things. That is in the forefront when we actually start about projects. Buying a piece of equipment, does it use less energy? Is it more efficient? Setting up a new building, is it LEED certified, right? Does it actually use Envision as it relates to some of the sustainability characteristics? Those are the types of things you need to start thinking about. That's what your investors are looking for. Frankly, that's what your employees are looking for. One of the conversations I have, which is amazing, is when you go out and actually look at early career people. I mean, OSU, great facility, right? You start to go and talk to folks and attracting talent. Number one question they always ask you about is always about sustainability, ESG. How do you give back to the community you work in? The fact that you make a lot of money is way down the list.
Great, yeah, and that's absolutely true, and it's consumers, voters, and employees are certainly prioritizing this more than ever before. Mike, I wanted to ask you as well about when Brian brought up labs. As you've really brought forward more support in this space, what are some of those discrete lab needs that you've seen, actual physical infrastructure in space?
Yeah, couple of different ways to look at that, and typically it follows the different sectors. So we have a facility now that we operate over on Kinnear Road. It's in the west side of campus. It's 68,000 square feet of innovation space. Historically, we have 55 companies working there. It's about a third office space, about a third lab space, and about a third manufacturing space. So that leads to a lot of variety. But the common thread between all those different types of spaces, beyond just having shared amenities and good coffee, or at least free coffee, it's not always good. What's most important is having access to the resources, the know-how, and some of the inputs you need. So when we're say we have a life sciences company, it's not just that they have a lab space to do their work and their research. They have access to people on the Rev 1 team who can support them. They have access to the universities and to the research institutions where they spend a lot of time. So they don't have to go out in the middle of nowhere to go and do their research and bring it. They can be central to it, and it creates a lot of serendipitous activities around it. So when we think of some of the things we're talking about of the business park and potentially some new facilities to open, where it becomes really exciting to entrepreneurs is where can they go and do their work and not only validate their product, whether it's digital or materials or physical in some nature, but where can they have access to the talent they need, to their customers, to get those quick feedback loops of whether they're doing the right things. So having a certain amount of density and diversity of people and background in those close environments is incredibly valuable and hard to create without the kind of thought that we're talking about here, which is how do you bring those folks together. So that's at the forefront of our mind when we think of how do we get the most out of our facilities today, but as we think of future generations of what those facilities can look like, what do we need to bring into them? Who needs to be there? Not only from the entrepreneur and advisor standpoint, but from an industry perspective as well.
Thanks for that. And you brought up talent. We've been talking about education, prospective employees. Are there any skill sets that are coming forward in particular at this moment that really buttress this conversation and are important in a way that they haven't been before? And that's a question for the group.
I would tell you, if you're trying to find an ESG person out there or someone who's in the sustainability space, they're in high demand. And I've actually been encouraging one of my kids to do that, but she wants to be a lawyer, so oh well. But definitely that whole space around sustainability, green, think about engineering as it relates to green and sustainability. That is a high demand area. Talent is very, very hard to find. Good talent is very, very hard to find. And so if we can create in Central Ohio, as we talked about, a community of practice, both from an innovation perspective, from a governmental side of things with the green park that we're putting together, from an industry side of things, that's just going to create more inertia, and then you're going to find people coming to the area as well too. Obviously, the college up the road. I'm looking at Josh over here. The college up the road with their sustainability practice there as well too. That's important. So I think it's all those entities working together will create some inertia to Central Ohio. That's going to help industry. That's going to help everybody find and attract that talent, because people want to be near other like-minded people who are having those same experiences, same capabilities, same thoughts.
Thanks. Any other comments on talent?
I'll add, we've been working, and MORPC-has been on the SEDS project and such. We've been talking about for decades, kids, do go to college. That's where you would get the degree on ESG. But there are other certification types of programs, that can be met. I will say, when you have advanced manufacturing and we can bring the whole supply, the whole circle here, there's so much more opportunity. So I think there's going to be jobs that we haven't, you really didn't hear of ESG a few years ago. So we start keeping the supply chain and be circular here, there'll be many more jobs that'll be created that we haven't even thought of.
Yeah, one thought just on top of that, it's not just professionals, right? It's not just credentialed people through universities. It's also folks operating advanced manufacturing and having that. Finding talent to run the machines that we have. And that is, again, if your machine is more efficient and effective and you can actually operate multiple machines using automation, that is key to it as well too. So it's not just people with degrees and letters after their names. It's the actual people in the facilities that we can give them, careers which are interesting and compelling. It's not just moving a piece of pipe from point A to point B. We know that, and we have, like a lot of the industries in Central Ohio, we have challenges right now with labor, and we know that more labor is not going to solve our labor problem. We need to look at automation. We need to look at advanced manufacturing. We need to do things more effectively and efficiently, and that's why companies like or things you're doing over here, any of that innovation we can have from a manufacturing perspective is certainly going to help us.
Yeah, a couple thoughts, and this is coming to my mind as I'm hearing you guys speak. So if you feel like I'm off course, just correct me. But I actually feel like as you're describing this, I think of the types of individuals that find their way into ESG is not unlike how entrepreneurs find their way. There maybe isn't a predominant set education and career path to say from getting in my freshman year of college to when I graduate, I'm going to be an entrepreneur when I graduate. It kind of happens organically through experience and where you find your passions and creativity and where they come alive. That's where we find the best entrepreneurs. They're not doing it right away. Maybe they're doing it 5 or 10 years into their career. And there's a similar path perhaps with ESG, in that you're finding people who are really passionate about the space, and they're willing and able to wear a lot of different hats. So there isn't just one box that you put ESG into. Like you said, there's a credential and you know how to do it. You got to think about materials, you got to think about software, you got to think about people, you got to think about location. There's all these different things, and to get the kind of resources you need in a company, to get the kind of resources you need in a community, you have to be very entrepreneurial in those roles. And so that's potentially an area where those two things, why they come together so nicely. And I'm thinking about a good friend of mine who's in ESG at a really growing corporation here in town. He interned with Rev 1 and he worked with entrepreneurs, and then he worked in planning and some other areas inside this company, and kind of found his way into heading up some of the things around ESG. So there's perhaps a lot of similarities and overlap in who makes a good entrepreneur and who'd make a good leader for this kind of an enterprise inside of a big company.
Great, thanks for that. I'll shift gears just a little bit. And first, a quick comment on talent. It is striking, and we're looking at this in the advanced automotive manufacturing space as well. You see that spectrum as you're getting at from GEDs and certifications all the way through PhDs, and making sure that you're plugging in folks at every level. And I think a key there is really understanding those pathways as they exist today and as they will exist tomorrow. You know, these are shifting so quickly. The programming, the educational programming, the workforce programming that's out there, and again, it's all the more reason just to be nimble and adaptable. I did want to shift a little bit to partnerships. I mean, we've talked about, you all have been talking about the partnerships you have together. Really, I also wanted to bring in from a regional perspective, and certainly for MORPC's membership, which is local governments and other units of government, you know, what are some of those partnerships that jump out to you, or even just general approaches to public sector partnership in this space? And that's for everybody.
I'll start, and I'll, you know, this might be a nice softball, but we have a great partnership with SWACO. So I'll speak to how the two of us work together in this space. And again, it kind of goes to that idea of diversity and diversification in your efforts. So SWACO, with the big goal to hit their diversion objectives, there's a portfolio of activities that you do. And some of it involves infrastructure, you have big investments as an entity. And again, we believe that, you know, whether it's SWACO or other companies, there's a sleeve of that can really be targeted around new innovations and new companies. So when we think of sustainability and ESG and the role that it has, you know, how we can support companies is, again, where does that overlap with the innovation part of an organization, and where can we help find new companies where you can come in, test new solutions and products, and ultimately get them into production. So again, I think it plays into diversity a lot, in that not all solutions are going to come from the biggest well-known household names. It takes a lot of new things getting created by entrepreneurs, and having a pulse on what's going on and being able to find the right time and place to tap into that should be a part of everyone's strategy in those spaces.
We've talked about the relationships we have here, but I mean, the other ones that are important to us are the city where we operate. I mean, I would say that across the country. I mean, having those good relationships with the municipalities or the towns or the cities in which we actually operate facilities is key to what we do. And it is a two-way relationship, right? Obviously, we're there, we're operating, we're part of the tax base, but also, I mean, a lot of what we do is making sure that there's the right approvals and acceptance for our products, and so that is a way for us to actually to push that. So it's good for them because we're there and we're part of the tax base. It's great for us because when you start to talk about some of the projects which are being done, parks and some of those investments into quality of life, our products help with that. And so it is very much a two-way conversation. We have a great relationship with the city of Hilliard where we are right now. The other thing I would say is we touched on Ohio State being here, but I mean, having those relationships with the different research facilities, with the different places where you can potentially get talent, and establishing those relationships is something that we have not traditionally done. It's something that we need to do more of, because again, it's a two-way street. It helps from a research perspective. It helps when you talk about sustainability. There's a great sustainability school there. We're in the sustainability space. I mean, it's just a natural to be able to get. And then obviously, agencies like SWACO, because we can help, right? But if you divert materials, one of the challenges always is, well, what happens to this big pile of stuff that we're now diverting? Good news, we can use that. And so I think there's lots of different places that we look at, but partnerships are key. I mean, we cannot do this alone. There's no way that we can do all this alone. We are good at certain things, and I think part of as a corporate entity is you got to choose what you're good at, and then you have to choose what you're not good at. And it's that second one that's the really hard one, because we want to believe we're great at everything, and the reality is we're not.
I'd have to echo that. I think I call it the clubhouse effect. We all have to have our own clubhouse, it seems, but you're right. You can't be all things to all people, and you do have to partner. And that's why when we first started our initiative, we started a working group of local economic developers. We were going to have our first meeting, then COVID hit. So we still have not met internally, but we got a sense, or are we on the right track? And we wanted to express to them, we're here to partner with the local communities and their economic development practitioners. And again, we want to try to attract businesses to them. But one thing, and I think it's hopefully there's economic developers here. I think it is the ESG and the recyclable materials is kind of new. When I first mentioned that, I think I think they were looking at it's just office recycling, but they might have businesses that want to use recycled material as an input into a product that they're making. And a few, I think, were in tune with that ahead of time, and now I think they're coming along. So I think all the economic developers, practitioners in this area work together, meet monthly, so I think there's some great opportunities, and we'll have to do it together. There's no doubt about it.
There's one other, I missed one, which is, we like to make sure that part of the ESG is your employees giving back to the communities in which they work, right? So a lot of nonprofits, a lot of organizations, we just spun up a foundation, which I think a lot of corporations are doing now, but the foundation allows us to invest in local communities that give back, right? So projects that actually get our employees engaged, and it's not just stroking a check, and we said that. Our foundation is not just going to stroke checks to causes that we think make sense. It's how do you actually engage your employees, and how do you make sure your employees are giving back as well too. So we're starting to talk about how do we give days off for people to volunteer, and I think that's important as well. As you think about the communities you work in, and the economic development pieces, is you have to give people an enriching environment. And I know a lot of companies in Central Ohio are now allowing their employees to volunteer, to take time off, to give back to their communities, and I think that's equally as important. And we didn't touch on that. So,
Brian, something you mentioned there, I want to emphasize again, because part of this is whether you're talking about sustainability or not. This idea of making those decisions on what do you build, what do you buy, where do you partner. And I want to emphasize it because it's not trivial. You have a lot of smart people in your company. You could build anything you want. You could literally do anything. You have some of the smartest people in your domains in the world. But it takes a lot of discipline, maybe even a lot of executive, senior leadership, helping dictate these are the things that are most strategic that we're going to focus on and build. Everything else, we're going to find partnerships. We're going to find other ways to get it done, because we can't do it all. We can't be all things to all people, as you said. So being really thoughtful about that. But sticking to it and not, if you leave it organically, people will kind of opt to, oh yeah, I could go ahead and build that, but you find out you build something that's more of a half measure than what you could get if you went out and partnered with the right firm, emerging or not, to do it.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's something we talk a lot about at MORPC, which is regionalism, and our unique challenge here in the Columbus region is that we're growing, and not every city, not every metro, not every region can say that, and much of what we're trying to do is manage that growth, understand it, and channel it in productive and sustainable ways. So I'm very interested in maybe the bigger picture, us versus maybe our peer cities, our peer metros. How do your approaches differ, or how does our leadership here differ from a city or a region that's maybe not growing in the same way as we are, or as fast as we are? And that's for everybody.
I'll let you go first on that. I'm going to take off your lead.
My first public position was in a planning department. I'll bring up an example. We just saw Nashville, Tennessee, 10 years of capacity in their landfill, and I'm not sure if you'd heard about that, but talk about putting a kink into economic development. And so we've looked at our facility. We're like a water plant or a sewer plant. We're that part of that infrastructure. So we have to excel in making sure we have enough space. And if we don't have enough space, how are we going to handle it? And trying to keep prices down so businesses, the cost of doing business is down also. So as far as the region, I know here recently we talked about partnering and such. There's a lot of efforts going on throughout the region that are sustainable related. We may not be always getting the accolades. You might see something like Site Selection Magazine. Columbus didn't even reach the ratings, but Toledo. I think Toledo was number one in the nation, definitely number one in the state, and then Cincinnati was up there. So there are opportunities just here for all the good things that we're doing to have that a little more coordinated, and so I think there's definitely some opportunities there. I will say also, as these new technologies happen and we get the drop the mic type of silver bullet solutions that come in, there's going to be more demand, and so that opportunity that we have to pull that supply here from the region we'll have to work together on that too, so we can supply the businesses, because we really don't have enough supply just right here. And I guess the last thing is I mentioned it before, just if we can keep everything, again, here, all the way along the supply chain, plus the advanced manufacturing, and we have manufactured more. Even some of the trinkets that we maybe not value as much, we may not have the shipping issues that we're seeing now on the West Coast. So I think that's one way to look at it, is bring it home, reshore, and hopefully we can take this as an opportunity.
I mean, we're obviously committed to the Central Ohio region. We've got some pretty aggressive growth plans. Over the next couple of years, we've grown pretty well the last few years, and we want to keep that going. And so there's a term that's used in infrastructure, which is resiliency, making sure that you invest in resilient infrastructure. And I would say that, to me, that's what is important about us here today, talking about Central Ohio. It's making sure that we make those investments in resilient infrastructure, and infrastructure which is going to support companies like the one I work for growing, companies that are going to spin up, like coming out of Rev 1, and making sure that we're making those investments, thinking about the future and thinking about the continued growth and sustainable growth for this region. And so that's, to me, is where I think Columbus does a good job. I think we could obviously always do a better job, but working as an entire community, and not necessarily it's Hilliard v. Dublin on where we choose to build our next facility. It's going to be somewhere in the Columbus area. Maybe we should be thinking about other places and other areas, and bringing companies here, as opposed to fighting amongst ourselves sometimes. I'm not saying that happens, but I mean, there is that sort of parochial interest around the different communities. We need to think about Central Ohio. We need to think about the investments in Central Ohio, and how do we make this a better place for companies to come to? Because, yeah, when I saw that list as well around, we didn't show up as the place from that magazine, and Columbus wasn't on it. That was for me. I'm like, we need to do better. So maybe there's some PR in there as well too. Just coming from a marketing guy, you wouldn't expect nothing less.
And what I'll add to that, and piggybacking off of what you said, Brian, is I think, and I'll speak to it from the perspective of supporting entrepreneurs and innovation and some of these new technologies, is a big asset we have as a region, is that alignment and that community engagement. So from Rev 1's perspective, we have 47 partners who fund our work, who we partner with around innovation, who invest in our funds, and dozens more where we're at the table, or vice versa, thinking about what the community needs. And that includes municipalities and government, that includes economic development, and that includes corporations and enterprise. So all of those groups working together, at least from our point of view of how do we create this infrastructure in the region to have the kind of innovation and the thriving entrepreneurial community that you say resiliency, I think of, how do we have as a community that capacity to adapt and capitalize on the things that are coming up. So when we look at it, we've been really successful in software and in life sciences, being able to capitalize on those emerging threads. So I get really excited when I think about the Green Economy Business Park, because a question that, I think we can answer as a community is, there's a little bit of a what if. What if, the assets that we have, the enterprises that we have, can make that a real hub for innovators and entrepreneurs in this space? And it may or may not bear out, but at least, if it is, we have the opportunity, because of all those aligning points, that we could capitalize on it if, as a region, we said, yeah, we really want to get behind it in that way. So that gets really exciting, because it can bear out in all these different sectors. But it really comes down to that alignment, and people, not having a zero-sum mentality when it comes to what we're doing in the community, but how do we build and be a net positive attractor for large companies and small.
Thanks. Certainly getting at the essence of that regional stewardship. So thanks for those answers. I'm glad to open up the floor for questions. I'm not sure if we can take online questions or not, but certainly in the room. Yes, sir.
So I'm Steve Grossman with Bexley's Environmental Sustainability Advisory Committee. My question's as follows. We are doing we're doing food waste pickup. We're probably the only community in the county, maybe in the state, that has figured out how to finance them. And it was a minimal cost to do that. I know MORPC has it's also unfortunate that when our state banned our ban on stopping plastics in our community, at the same time Cuyahoga County and one or two other places are thinking about it, there was somebody from the chamber in Cleveland who wanted, let's slow down, let's think about this before we do it. So my question is possible, has there been any thought of picking up, and I'm thinking residentially, but it's probably also commercially, of having two streams, plus an additional stream of plastic pickup at home? There's a challenge in this community to figure out how to do food waste pickup on a long-term basis, and without really putting the financial burden on the residents. Is it possible, there has been a discussion, to have some company picking up food waste, and then, because we're all putting our garbage out right now in 3 buckets, and sometimes 4, because grass waste, garden stuff. Is it possible to have a fixed stream out there for plastics and a stream out there for food waste to address that? Find a company that can do that, put it to the private sector. Has that been discussed or thought about?
Thanks, and I'll repeat the question for the online audience. So the question was really, is there any thinking around bringing forward a food waste specific recycling stream in addition to something like the plastic recycling stream?
From a economic development standpoint, everything has costs. Logistics have costs. So what makes sense? What's exciting is if organics can be turned into a product, then as a possibility, an innovative product, then all of a sudden, there's some more value. There are discussions about how many routes can we do? Can we have an efficient way of picking up organics? But again, it does come back to the end product. Otherwise it's cost. But but there are discussions on that. But how many trucks do you send? Do you send 5? Do you send 6? Do you send 7? And then the other side of that coin is the sustainability of that, the carbon emissions of that many trucks, the wear and tear on the roads, the fuel usage. So there's always these balances, and so again, we got to look at it a little bit more holistic. But there are discussions on routes. As far as separating plastics, I will say, as Brian had mentioned before, they'll accept post-industrial, which is the cleanest type, and in the residential pickup, like you're describing, generally plastics, depending on the product, depending on the off-taker, they'll have different tolerances, for contamination. I guess what, at least right now, from the innovative standpoint, the green business park standpoint, we're trying to find businesses that might have high tolerances for contamination on, let's say, plastic films. We had a business that was we were excited about that would take basically contaminated or very low value paper and very low value plastics, mesh these two products together for a construction product. So obviously housing, this would go into housing or commercial buildings. So that's the circular type of economy that can really get exciting for, especially for low value. I'll take this a little further. In the recycling center project that we're doing now, we are going to try to. We know that a recycling center needs to happen. We'd like to have a regional one, stay here. We'd like whoever operates that. It'll be a public-private partnership. We'd like the operator to work with off-takers, and we're trying to develop a forum to bring innovative off-takers together with the operators. So we can do the same thing possibly with organics too. Who's that innovative off-taker? And it'd be interesting to see if a business that can create plastics out of organics, that would be amazing.
Yeah, I'll add to that in some of the work that we've done with SWACO. So we work together to focus on food waste as part of the waste stream, which is 15% of the waste stream. So if you want to talk about food waste,
one of your Swaco colleagues, Kyle O'Keefe, is somebody to go and talk to because he's very, very passionate about it. So we've looked into some solutions around the residential side of things without getting into the specifics of those, but the crux of it and why some of them we haven't been able to work with, it does come down to the economics of it. So how do you either find the community who's willing to take on that cost to bring in those resources, or do you find the right company that's found the technology to be able to do it at a low enough cost because they can take that output and actually turn it into a revenue stream for them, which is what we've seen. Now, that company isn't quite ready to do it residentially because that's a whole nother layer of infrastructure, but if you plop it down next to a food production facility, well, the economics of it work pretty well. So it's probably more of a matter of time and the right technology coming together than it is whether or not it can happen at all.
I would tell you from a manufacturing perspective, sure. We would love to have pure streams. That would make it so much better as opposed to mixed plastics. The challenge at curbside generally is most consumers don't know there's 7 types of plastic. It's plastic, it goes in the box, and away you go. I mean, the reality is we take type 2 plastic, which is HDPE. Everything else, unfortunately, or a lot of it, ends up in landfill. We could take type 5. We are actually working with a group called the Recycling Partnership. And they are actually actively working with different municipalities across the U.S. to invest in equipment that allows you to take type 5 out. Polypropylene or type 5 is probably the next best plastic stream. But I mean, there are some issues when you get into curbside recycling as it relates to that. So easy answer is, yeah, we'd love people to be able to put different plastics into different things. Now, the economic piece is very, very real about how you would actually all pick that up. And there are those challenges with education from a consumer side of things. So I think theoretically, it makes a lot of sense. The cleaner that we as a manufacturer could take the raw materials, because we do a lot of testing, we do a lot of sorting, there's actually a lot of rejection that happens in our recycling facilities. And so we'd love that to happen, but it's got to be good from an economic perspective. But I think that's where the partnerships start to work. If you start to say things like, well, how much would it cost you to do that and send multiple trucks versus how much does it cost me in a facility to be able to actually test and separate and split, and then you start to look at where the profit pools are and how you actually share those. Those are the types of relationships that are really, really powerful, because you're looking at how much money across the entire, or where the economic value is across the entire stream, and then where the profit pools are, and then how do you divvy those up. Those are the types of partnerships that frankly work the best for us when we have relationships with companies like Swaco and Rumpke and Waste Management. We talk about all those different pieces and parts, and we actually share information about how we can use and utilize better efficiency from the plastics we get. Wet plastic is bad. A lot of bales are stored outside. We don't like when you get wet into our equipment, so we've actually talked to some of the providers about how do you actually turn that around faster. We've actually got a couple places where we send trucks to get things, and it's all based on that conversation. And so the dialogue is the important part. And with good dialogue, we'll be able to figure out really economical ways to make that happen.
You know, I've heard of a product that uses polypropylene, and they create the stormwater type of
they're big
containers.
And they're yellow.
Yeah, I thought it was your company.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And we would like polypropylene to go in those, but we can't find any.
So that's but that's an example of innovation. You merge with a company or purchased a company. Yeah. So there's that measure of diversity of the businesses. So but then there's also that supply. You know, you got to have that bulk supply. So we know that even if we collected all the plastics in this region, we're gonna have to pull more plastics from outside the region.
Great, thanks for that, and great question. Thank you so much. So that is going to conclude our time. I'm sorry, it was an excellent question though. So we are going to conclude just to make sure we stay on our live stream schedule. Thank you all so much. We do have a sign-in sheet here for continuing education credit for those that would like it. Let's thank all of our panelists. We have Jeff Wilkins with Swaco, Brian King with ADS, and Mike McCann with Rev1. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very good at moderating.
First time I played one of these in a while, but I'd love to.
Yeah, for sure. I will most definitely. I don't have business cards because I'm playing this. Actually, I've been lazy getting business cards, but now I'm like, okay, sustainability. I'm going to do it.
When you see this inside, and you see that many, you're like, wow. Well, if we did that, wouldn't it be even more? So I think that's probably numbers we'll need to read.
I didn't look at the other side, I just noticed that this is
No, it does. It does. I agree. Yeah, especially that's the first thing when we look at this and you look at that like, boy, that's not as motivating as it should be.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be great. We've done. I know we've done some testing with you guys on some of our longevity testing and some of the deep burial and some of these other things. So yeah, we have a good relationship, I think, with you guys. But that's also
I've not heard of a lot of. Yeah, it's missed a lot of what y'all were talking about, and yeah, so hopefully, maybe some of that education will
no, that'd be good. Even interning or things like that. We've done a
But
sort
on
of
that innovation side,
mediocre job at actually being planful about how we get interns and where we do. COVID sort of thrown that all upside down.
all of those things.